Welcome to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And on this episode, we are continuing our conversation about forging a different path and doing things differently than the crowd.
You work hard every single day, saving people's lives. You deserve to have a team who's gone all in, who's opened up every chapter of the book, and by the way, will never stop opening up the book to learn new things that come in. And so I think it's really, really important that you understand your current team. I promise you, they are not doing this, and you deserve more. So in our last episode, we were talking about, I know this is a continuation of what we were just talking about, but I think, Bob, your lived example in the career path that you chose is such a good and poignant conversation for a lot of the doctors who are listening to this podcast. More importantly, to understand how we're able to help them specifically, because you looked at the path that most financial advisors took, and you intentionally chose a different path, and that created what we now have today as Terra Firma. And so I'd love for you to share a little bit about your journey and why we're able to help members the way that we do.
Yeah, no, that's and it's always uncomfortable for anyone to talk about themselves. So I'll try really hard to do that. Obviously, these guys know I'm kidding. Of course, it's easy to talk about because it has been such a blessing going through this journey. It started off with wanting to do something that was a goal and a dream of mine. I didn't allow everything out there to create that fear. So we'll start from the beginning. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Loved it. Loved the idea of the different types of money and the psychology of money. And as a kid, I had a paper route. And at the time, on the business section, they had all the stock quotes. No idea what any of that looked like. But at the end of the day, that always intrigued me. And so I knew I always wanted to be in some type of business, some type of finance. I enjoyed talking to people. So after I read his book, I decided to get his second book, Cash Flow Quadrant. And when I finished that, newly married at the time, within a couple years of being married, I closed it up and I leaned over to my wife and I said, I'm going to go in the financial service industry. I'm ready to do it. She's like, okay. So I took that as a yes, and I went down that pathway. But I didn't have a license. Meaning I didn't have a degree. Most places look for 4-year degrees. So what did I do? I didn't let that stop me. I went and looked for the path that didn't require a 4-year license. Right? Don't allow things in your pathway that say you have to do this. This is that long line you were talking about in the last episode, Joe. No, you don't have to stand in that line. There's other pathways. So you just look for it. It's there, right? It's not like we're all in this little square box or anything like that. And so anyways, I went down that pathway, got my licenses, I got my insurance license, went down that path and realized sitting there in training, looking around, I'm like, 40, 45 people here, and we're all being taught the same thing. Yeah, we're all at different parts of the country, but like, that dude's good looking. He's got a hell of a smile. He's going to kill it. I'm like, she's awesome. She is so eloquent, and she's such a great listener. Oh my goodness, she's going to kill. And then I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, crap, I got to do something different. Got a face for radio. What are we going to do here? And so, kidding aside, I didn't want to be like the herd. And so going through this process, I realized that I wanted to work with business owners, but I had a fear of working with business owners. My background, German, my dad, my grandpa, German, business owners. And the old adage is that the only time you'll see a German smiling is when they have a beer in their hand. There's a reason for that saying. They're just very stoic, and they're barbarians for a reason, right? It's not because they're smiling around skipping in through the tulips, right? They're just hard people. And I was like, wow, but it created a fear in me because my parents separated, right? So I didn't have a really good personal relationship with either. And it just created this immature mindset of what a business owner was like. So rather than me allow that to control my mindset, I quit what I was doing and went a pathway that put me in that pathway to learn how to work with business owners. And that's when I went in commercial P&C. Wasn't to learn business insurance, commercial P&C insurance, boring. It was to learn how to talk and work with business owners. I learned really quickly, very immature. Awesome. But that is the point, right? Ryan Holiday writes a book called The Obstacle is the Way. Whether you hear a lot of times that, well, if you have a fear of something, hit it head on. Well, yeah. And because you realize that it's really not something that should be taking control over you. And so those were kind of the foundational steps that I took. And every time I learned something new, I learned a new strategy. I always figured out, how can I make this better for the solutions and the productivity I want to provide to my clients? And a lot of the questions that clients asked me or prospects asked me, I took that and said, how can I improve what I'm doing? Because they're not going to be the only one with that question. So I forced myself to evolve all the way to the point, fast forward to now we're in 2020. My wife and I were already planning on leaving Southern California after our son graduated high school. 2020 happened, right? We had a great community, so a lot of us really didn't change what we did. As a community, still hung out, still went to each other's friends, had dinner, that kind of stuff in our community. But the conversation got worse and worse. And what I mean by that is that we felt like there was no hope. And the conversation wasn't positive anymore. It wasn't productive anymore. And my habits that I built up were all built on positive habits, production, solutions. Okay. You can complain to me once, twice, the third time, you know what? Shut up. Right?
Right. Do something about it.
Yeah, do something about it. Right? Because if you're complaining to me, a lot of times my wife's the same way, is we're going to give you some help and advice and opinions on our personal experience that we've seen work. Not stuff that we're just pulling off a shelf and say, hey, read this book. In fact, better yet, listen to my empty opinion. Right? So one of the things we talk about is that we eat our own cooking. There's a reason why we say that, because we do, right? I didn't get this size because I don't eat. I eat my cooking, right? And so in going through this process, we made the decision to leave California. We did. We left family and friends. Horribly hard, but we did it because it was the right thing to do for my wife and I and our kids. Right? In our next stage in life, and things weren't going to get better and haven't. We visit our family and friends and we know it hasn't. Right? And so how in the world can I tell you or suggest to you to do something and face fears or make decisions if I've never done it? Don't you want a leader? Don't you want somebody who takes you down that pathway and understands with the empathy and sympathy of what it takes to make that decision? And a lot of people don't. They stay. I can't tell someone to save money on taxes and still live in California, and I'm overpaying in taxes in California. That's silly. But there's a lot of tax planners and tax strategists who live in California who do that. Well, why? Why are you doing that? And so for me, it was just more of that mindset of, okay, how am I going to learn stuff? And so I bought businesses, started businesses. Some worked, some didn't. Great learning experience, right? One of the things that Kobe Bryant talks about a lot of times is that there's not a failure and success. There are periods of learning, right? And everything is a moment of learning. And we like to say when you fail, you're going to learn more. But I actually think it's the opposite. I think when you succeed, we choose not to learn from that. We choose to be mediocre and settle in that success. And the world around us does not do that. So I think there is more to learn in the success than there is in the failure because the failure, don't do that again. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's like the saying of, practice makes perfect. It's like, no, perfect practice makes perfect. Like that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
So that those successful repetitions ingrain in you the way to do things.
And they were one decision at a time, right? And each decision made it easier to make the next decision because I saw the results of that decision, right? Doesn't mean every decision was right, but I learned from every decision of what the next one should look like. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean that I'm this on a pedestal. No, it means I'm going through the same struggles you're going through, and I'm making decisions to correct those struggles. And what's interesting, and we forget about this a lot of times, and as a listener, you're a physician. Your last day of medical school, how much of the previous 3 years do you repeat your last class of medical school? Do you go back to class 1, chapter 1 and talk about all that stuff? No, it all builds upon it. You're learning a language. And it's the same thing with success. It's the same thing with business. It's the same thing in sports. It's the same thing in taxes. Everything has a language to it, has a flow to it. And if you want to be stronger in your faith, whatever that is, read more books in your faith. And guess what? Those books become easier to read because you already built a foundation of language.
Mm-hmm.
That's everything's like that. That's why we're not learning adding and subtracting again in college. We already learned it. I'm not learning how to read A, B, C. I've already learned it. Right? So in our humanity, God created us to be able to evolve from what we've decided on doing and learned. So if we continue to make decisions to build upon that, things do become easier. They become less fearful, less risky. Fear exists because the lack of understanding of what we're going to do and decide to do. Right? So that's what we're trying to do, and what we tried to build at Terra Firma was, great, we want to eliminate as much fear as possible, understanding there's still that insecurity, there's still that fear, because you may not be working, or your other friends may not be working with a tax strategist or whatever, right? But the ecosystem that we've developed for physicians and business owners, but for physicians specifically, is to address exactly what you're feeling. Every aspect, every decision, every word we say, every action we take, every follow-up we take, every single thing is there purposely to help you.
Well, and to eliminate that fear, I think what's funny is like the most underutilized asset that we have is all the training that we provide to our members, because they'll ask a million questions like, I get it. I get that this is new for you. Here's everything. Here's all the rationale. We have a whole video series on every single step of what we do.
Yeah.
And nobody watches it, which is funny to me. Like they can, it's all accessible. Bob and I were having an interesting conversation with one of our members the other day, and he was talking about I think it was his CPA, his former CPA was like, I hope you're not doing this. And it's like, yes, we are. That's exactly what we're doing. And he was like, because that'll never work. And I said, why do you think he said that? And of course, it's because of fear, because he doesn't know. He doesn't know that. And I said, here's what we'll do. I'll bet you. We'll have a debate, and whoever wins this debate, the loser pays the other one $250,000. I know we're going to win because Bob has researched this all the way to, and it's literally examples that come from the US tax code. His guy has never even opened up that chapter of the book. So of course there's fear around things that you don't know. And so I think that's really important, Bob. What you have built in Terra Firma, in the membership, is that knowledge base. Anyone could come in and like literally could catch up to where you're at if they chose to go through everything.
Yeah. And that's why all that content was built out. Was I wanted it to be credible and completely transparent. From our tax return academy videos that we go through to our economic termites, you can go to Asset Coach Tax Strategist YouTube, where I go through all of that content as well on YouTube channel. So it's there as well. You don't even have to be a member to access that, right? To the point of the books I've written, to the details of some of our strategies once you become a member, an explanation of the strategies.
Well,
Right?
and it always ends the same way because you chose to take a different path. You chose to open up the chapters of the book that no one else is opening. And I don't know why they're not opening it. Probably because they're successful enough without actually having to give a damn about what it says. They've gotten enough knowledge to be able to eke out a living. Some of them a really good living, some of them a great business, but not to serve you. And I think that's our job, is to help maximize the level of service we can provide to you, doctor. You work hard every single day, saving people's lives. You deserve to have a team who's gone all in, who's opened up every chapter of the book. And by the way, will never stop opening up the book to learn new things that come in. And so I think it's really, really important that you understand your current team. I promise you, they are not doing this. And you deserve more. So I would open up the book. Anyone can open it up. Yeah. Most of them are not. And you've got to be aware of that.
Yeah. Joe, and this is why I finally ended up taking the stance and the approach of looking at the IRS tax code and the IRS itself from a more positive, productive perspective. Yes. Right? Because that was my entire purpose in my career, but realizing the more I learned, the more I realized the tax code is written for you, right? As a business owner. It's written for you as a successful person, right? It's actually a code of telling you what you can do. And to your point in your example of that conversation with our client, people aren't doing that. Other professionals aren't doing that. They're fearful of what they don't know because they haven't dove into it.
Right.
But building that and understanding it and embracing it's a roadmap. If I want to get from here to Philadelphia via road, there's a pathway.
There's a best pathway.
Yeah. And guess what? If I'm on that pathway and there's road construction, I can detour around that and get back on path. That's life. Every example in our life does that. Why in the world do we think that all of a sudden this is different?
Well, and the reason there's a confidence level is every time, not most of the time, every time without exception, when we have a conversation with a quote unquote tax expert, whether it's a CPA or it's a legal tax expert or an estate planner, every time I've jumped onto these calls with you, Bob, they all end the same, with the person going, wow, like I never looked at it that way. And I'm so thankful that God put you on the path that you chose to go on, Bob. It was not the normal path, but it was because of the way he built your brain to look at things differently, to serve people at a higher level. And most people who do that hoard that knowledge. That's just honestly what most of the people do. You have chosen to give that freely. You give some of it into content that we talk about here or on Asset Coach Tax Strategist. But for our members, the whole book is open. You can see everything. You can invite your team to come in, criticize it, analyze it, criticize it. Let us know where you think there's holes.
Absolutely.
And so I'm thankful that you chose to take the path that was not taken by everyone else, because it's created something really amazing to serve our members.
Thank you.
I would say, Doc, as you're listening to this, I hope it inspires you the last couple of episodes. Just take stock and inventory of your life. Ask yourself those questions. Where am I just following the herd? Where do I need to do something different? Because someone's going to be listening to this episode, and 20 years from now, we're going to have a conversation with them, and they're going to say, you said something back in late 2024 that changed my life, and I chose to look at things differently, and it's never been the same since then. I hope this inspires somebody to make that choice. So if that's you, take stock and inventory, determine where you're going to go. Please let us be part of your journey. We'd love to be the team that helps you on the financial side. So we can't wait to talk to you next time. And until then, go be a wealth maverick.